part 2 of this watch adventure. So today I'm wearing a Casio G-Shock. It's a little bit dirty. This particular G-Shock is made in Japan, and it's a GW 5000U. Now the problem with this particular watch is I got it running like this, but if I turned it upside down it would stop. And when I was looking through the plates here, I did notice that it looked as though the pallet fork was higher on the side that interacts with the impulse jewel and lower on the other side, which means the darn thing is at an angle. So what I want to do with this is take it apart and look and see if it's at an angle. So if this thing is at an angle, can I adjust it so that angle goes away? Also, I want to have a look at the end shake. Somebody mentioned online that I may have an end shake problem, which means that when the pallet fork is in the movement and I grab it, I can go up and down way too much, right? So that's an end shake problem. So if I kind of get close here, I'm going to get a little bit close and see if I can measure the end shake on this watch. So there is a very tiny bit of end shake, but it might be enough to stop the watch. Yeah, I can see it getting very close to the roller table on the top when it's moving. So can I bend that down? That's the trick. Is that possible? So I do have to take this apart now. So first I'm going to remove the pallet, or I'll tuck it in here nicely in this Myers number 58 movement holder, and I'm going to remove the balance on this by just loosening up the balance cock here. And like all good watchmakers, grab that screw and get it out of the way. That's the trick. Now I grab a smaller screwdriver and I just want to wedge it in here like this and see if I can get this balance to just rise up a bit like that. And now I'm going to grab the balance like this, and I'm just going to flip it over in my hand and put it in the blue case I have here on the side. I'm just going to rest this down in the case like that, and it's balanced flat up, and I'll be able to disassemble the plates now. So the first plate I'm going to disassemble is for the mainspring here, and I just have to remove these two screws and put them out of the way. Now I'm going to loosen screw 2. You grab that like that, loosen that screw, and the same thing, grab that and just put it out of the way. Now I'm going to take the plate off just by getting my screwdriver in the edge here. And you got to do this in a place where if you scratch the plate just a bit, no one's going to see it. So there, the plate is now removed. Alright, now I could take out the barrel, but I have no need to take the barrel out because all I want to do is get access to the pallet fork. So I'll remove these 3 screws. When you do that, just grab your screwdriver here, and these are nicely snugged in but not tightened too much. And there's screw 1. Now I'm going to remove the second screw. There's only 3 screws in this upper plate, and they screw into the side pillars. And if I move the 58 movement holder sideways before I take the final screw out, you'll see the side pillars. They're right there. Now I'm going to remove the 3rd screw from the top. And set that aside. Now the plate should just come up, straight up, but I have to move it towards the mainspring in order to free it from the balance from the pallet fork. The pallet fork sticks right in there. Now lift the plate out of the way, and you can see the pallet fork right here, and it interacts with the escapement. Now I'm going to remove the pallet fork, and to do that you just grab the pallet fork and lift it straight up like that. And you can see there's still leftover energy on the watch, and it's just running down the train. And that is a very good response. You want that train to run down a bit because there was a little tiny bit of power left in the barrel. And there it stopped by itself naturally. Now if I look at that pallet fork, I'm just wondering whether I can see the angle. So the back part should be slightly lower than the front part. So what I'm going to do is put that in my staking set and see if it rises up on one side. So this is my very nice CE Marshall staking set, and all I need to do is find the right hole to put this in. I want it to be precisely the right diameter to drop this into. So be very careful of the pivots as you put that into the staking set. Let me grab this now and very carefully find the right size hole. And this one goes all the way down. What I'm going to do now is eyeball it from both sides to see if this side is a bit higher. You will notice that when I replaced the top plate with another one, that these screws are absolutely flat, which is excellent. And this is what you want. Now this dart interacts with the very small gap on the roller table. The other thing I need to check is that this impulse jewel is not in fact loose. It seems to be pretty solid there, so there's no problem there. And if I look at how that dart would interact, there is enough real estate on the top of this, so the dart shouldn't represent a problem when I look at it this way. But if that table goes, or the pallet fork goes up, which is down here, then that is perhaps going to interact with by touching the plate here, and that could be where the problem is. And if I look at the balance, the roller table is correctly seated in place, so that is not the problem. So the adjusting the dart on that, I don't think that'll will help the situation, because shortening it is not going to remove the fact or relieve it from the actual pallet fork touching the table, the metal part touching the table, if it's going too deep when I turn it the other way around. Now the other thing I need to do is look at the jewel itself, and this is the jewel right here, and the question is, it's a depthing issue. So this jewel is the jewel that holds that pallet fork, and that jewel looks like it's in pretty darn good condition, I think, but I'm going to have a look at this under the microscope to see if there's any issue with this jewel itself. So now I'm going to very carefully put the plate back on and check the depth between jewels. The flat screws need to be on this side to allow the plate for the mainspring barrel to fit on. So I put a rounded screw here, and so I've got to remove that and put the flat screw in place. And this is where the rounded screw goes, right here, so that it's not interfering at all with the plate that I have to put over the mainspring barrel. So I just grab that screw like this and put that in place. And the reason why I'm doing this again is so I can have a look at the jewel settings that are on either side of the pallet fork to make sure those jewel settings haven't been shifted at all. So now I grab the plate for the barrel, and nothing has to be tight here. I just need to put it in place just so the barrel doesn't fall out. So I just add that screw and then add the other screw. So I just screw this down nice and carefully. Try to make sure that your screwdriver is centered on the screw. Grab the second screw and put that in place. And you'll see how these screws are a bit rounded on the top, but it doesn't matter because it won't interfere with anything that is on top of this movement. So now I'm going to check this jewel setting here. That's the upper jewel setting for the pallet fork. And I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to check this jewel setting here, which is the lower jewel setting for the pallet fork, to make sure they haven't shifted out of position. Now I'm examining this movement under the microscope to make sure those jewels and the settings are correctly in place, and there's not a lot of movement at all, if any. Shouldn't be any movement. That way my end shake is good. Now I'm going to have a look at this pallet fork under the microscope. So the jewels are all correct. It does look like the pallet fork is bent up just ever so slightly on this side here. And this screw is absolutely flush. So I'm just thinking, can I get a stake over the top here and just put another stake over here and just keep this in place while I try to bend this down a bit with a stake. So let's set that up. Again, I'm not sure if this adjustment will fix the pallet fork or cause me a different problem, but we're going to try this anyway. So first I need a centering stake. Then I'm going to generally move my piece so it's sort of over the centering stake. Then I take out the centering stake, make sure that this is absolutely centered, and tighten it in the back. And then I need to put the piece back in the exact same hole. It's kind of tricky sometimes, but you can use a centering stake to make sure you don't pick the wrong hole. So it's that hole right there. Now it's back in the exact same hole. Now I just lower the centering stake to make sure I didn't get the wrong hole. And that is right on the money, right there. Now I have to install this balance staff remover over the top to hold this piece in place. So I'm going to use one of the stakes that this comes with and place it down, make sure it's on top, and then pull it out of the way. Then I take this piece here and move it over the top of the piece, and I push the stake slightly through this at the top. Now I know it's aligned, and I can push this all the way down if I want. So now I know it's centered, and now I simply have to unscrew this on the top and it will tighten down onto this piece. So now it's tightened on the piece, but I want to make sure my handle is out of the way so I can use my hammer. So I'll just use my screwdriver here and hold that piece while I rotate this handle out of the way. So I want the end piece to be visible to the stake. So that's it there, and now we can tighten this up by unscrewing it, because that'll tighten it on top of the piece. And now I've got it fairly tight in there, and I can leave the other stake in place. So this is kind of what it looks like in place. Now I'm going to take a stake with a groove in it to protect the pin here on the end of the pallet fork, the dart as it's called. Now I'm going to tap this down very carefully, and paying regard to where that dart is. I'm holding this with one hand. Line it up here carefully, and I'm going to tap down on the end here and see if that produces a bit of an angle. I think it worked, but I'm going to tap it down just a little tiny bit more. So just line that up like this. And I've got it as vertical as I can get it. And now tap down on that again. So now that's definitely down a little further, just a tiny bit. Now that might be enough to free up the this impulse, or this pallet fork. I cannot bend the shaft on this pallet fork in relation to the top plate. So just very carefully I'm going to remove all the pieces of this, and I just have to tighten this way, and it should come loose. Just tighten it down a bit, and then examine the top to make sure there's no problem with the pallet fork. It doesn't look like it, and now I'll lay it down and have a look at it. So now I'm going to carefully remove it from the staking set. The many uses of staking set. I lay this thing down like that and see if I got a little tiny bit of a bend on there to compensate for the angle of the shaft on the pallet fork. I think I did. Yeah, I absolutely did. Now that might actually solve the problem, and we'll just reassemble this and have a look. So now you've seen another use for these, other than actually removing balance staffs safely. I used it for a different purpose, and it snugged that part up against the staking set nicely. So that's another use of these if you happen to get a hold of a set. Now I have to disassemble the movement to remove the pallet fork. Or should I say, put the pallet fork back in place. So now I'm removing the plate. I took the 2 screws out, and now I'll remove the screws here from this plate. First the round one, the rounded top screw, and then the flat screws on either side. And now I'll lift the plate straight up. And as I did before, I'm going to install the pallet fork upside down and put a small piece of Rodico in there to hold it down. Now you grab the pallet fork and make sure it's in the right direction, with the mouth of the pallet fork going inside here, and the back of that pallet fork is between the banking pins. Now you just make sure that it's in place where the jewel is and you don't have any issues. Then you grab yourself a piece of Rodico, stretch it out just a bit, grab a very small piece from the end of it, like that. Turn it into a little bit of a cigar, move it sideways, place the cigar down on the plate, the opposite side of where the jewels are, squish that cigar down with your tweezers. If it doesn't stay down, just keep working on it. And eventually you'll get enough surface of that Rodico to hold that down. Then the other side is just lightly placed over the top like that. So it's this kind of configuration. Let me show you that up close. That's what it looks like. Like that. It's pushing it down a bit, but you should try to make it as flat as possible so you can adjust it a bit after you've got it down like that, and just push it up on the other side just a tad. That way the pivot will fit perfectly in the upper without a problem. Now all you do is take this plate and put it back in place very carefully. Just align it as good as you can with these posts like I did before, and things should drop in place relatively, but you'll want to put a couple of screws down extremely loosely in order to make sure the plate doesn't fall out when you tweak the pivots. So here I'm going to grab the flat screws, which should have been on this side, like that. Remember, flat screws on this side to ensure that the plate for the mainspring can fit over the top. So I screw those in very lightly until I have the pivots in place. So I'm not even seeing any pressure after I put that screw in. Now I grab the next flat screw, hopefully that's a flat screw, and put that in this side. Let me have a look at that. Nope, that is not a flat screw. So I can put that up top and grab the flat screw. Let me just put this in place. Again, I'm not tightening this at all. I'm just putting it in place but not tightening it, and I just don't want the plate to move around while I'm trying to tweak the pivots. Now I'll grab the third screw and put that in place and screw that down. I don't screw it down tightly again, I just screw it down extremely loose because I just want to lift this up now, and I want to tweak the pivots. Now the tool I have to do this is this tool here, and I can reach inside now and bring it up to my face, horizontal or parallel with my face, and tweak the pivots until this drops down. And you'll see the wheels are at a bit of an angle right now, and that's expected until you tweak it in place. Now I can do this without putting the plate on for the mainspring barrel because I'm going to be lifting this up to my face. Now you look at all the pillars to make sure they're all down flat and there's no issue at all, and you can screw these down and tighten them up nicely. One at a time. The flat ones first, and try to make sure your screwdriver is over the center, and I'm not tightening it completely until I check it again to make sure the pillars are down flat and I'm not squishing any pivots. You can also look at each one of the pivots to make sure they're sticking out through the holes. So there's a pillar right there, and you can see the pillar here and the upper plate, and you can see there's no gap there at all, which means that's down flat. And then the other pillar on the back end is exactly the same. It's down here and it's down flat. If I look very closely to the jewels, you can see the pivot sticking out the top, and I'll flip that around the other way just to make sure, and it should be fine. And you can also see the pallet fork sticking out through the middle, so hopefully this repair actually worked. So now I'll tighten each one of these screws and make sure that it's in good position. Now the mainspring barrel hasn't moved at all in this operation, so I should be able to put the plate right over the top of the mainspring barrel like that, push that down just a bit, and I'll reapply these two screws into the holes that are provided, and that goes right down into the plate. And that's why you have to have the flat ones on the bottom so that this can go straight down. Now we'll tighten these screws, and you have to make sure that the hole where the mainspring arbor comes through is nicely lubricated. And before I put any pressure at all on the mainspring, I'm going to look down here and I'm going to move that pallet fork to make sure there's movement. And yes, there is. And now I'm grabbing a bench key and I'm looking for the winding position here and flipping this into position and put a little bit of wind on this watch. Now I simply have to touch the pallet fork. I'm going to use a needle to touch the pallet fork, and we'll see if that thing snaps back and forth. There it is. It snapped one way and then it snapped the other way. So that worked perfectly. So this should be able to give power to the watch. Now I've got the pallet fork in my hand, or the balance cock in my hand. I have to swing the pallet fork over to one side so that I can make sure the jewel enters the pallet fork from this side, which means I need to turn the watch this way and then lower the balance and then turn it. But I do that with tweezers. So I grab the balance cock right there on the side, make sure I've got at least 90-degree angle from the mouth, and then drop the balance cock into place, and the lower jewel will accept the actual pivot from the balance. Now what I have to do here is very carefully make sure that this goes into place like that. And there you go. And then it starts to run right away, but I still have to put the screw in. So the good news is I put a slight bend on that pallet fork, and it did not interfere with the operation of the watch in this position. So we still don't know whether this watch will work with the face up, in the face up position. So you have to make sure the balance is actually running well before you completely put the screw in place. I can see it stalling just a bit. Now it's not stalling anymore because as you tighten the screw here, the balance cock angle might change until it's completely flat. This balance is actually running nicely now, and I'm going to check this in the upside down position. And if it doesn't run, we did the diagnostics, we did the change, and if this doesn't run, then I may have another problem, and I'll have to diagnose that, take it apart, and go start all over again. But this will be the end of the video after I check it in the face up position. So as you can hear, it is running in the face up position, but it's not running really strong. And the bend did work. It moved it slightly away from the roller table, but it needs to be bent just a little bit more. And then that'll free it up from the roller table, and then I'll have good action on this watch. So that's it. That bend did work, and I just noticed it's very close to that roller table still. So it needs to go down just a bit more, and that should do it. I don't think I need to file material off the top, which is another way of doing it, but it's not a bad repair in general. So it's a good little watch, and we'll get this thing all cased up later on, and away we go. So thanks for watching my video. Thanks for staying in touch, and please hit like, and please share this video. This was a very unique repair, and it probably has to do with the end shake of that pallet fork and the jewels, but there was no way of lowering that upper jewel, the jewel on this side here, to cause the pallet fork to stay down more. There's just no way of doing it. I would have had to change that pallet fork completely, and I don't have another pallet fork I can flip with. So thanks a lot, and that's it. It's running upside down or face up, but it's not running as strong as I want it to. I'm going to take this apart again and just take it out and use the exact same technique and lower it just a bit more. Thanks a lot. JD here. Hope you enjoyed this video.